Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Clarizen introductory webinar today. My name is Dimitri Druck, and I'll be introducing the webinar for you. What you see on here is the phrase enable business agility. That really is the core message behind what Clarizen wants to provide for its customers. And you may be wondering, well, what exactly does that mean? I know the term agile gets thrown around a lot these days, and it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And in our context here, it boils down to one simple thing. We recognize that there are changing environments, both internal and external. And your success as an organization is largely dependent on your ability to adapt to those changing environments. And that's what we want to help you do with Clarizen here today. Some of the main challenges that we set out to solve. First, folks are being asked to do more work faster and with fewer resources. And there's obvious challenges, I think, that come along with that. The second is one of visibility. Whether it's top down, bottom up, or across the organization, it's important for everybody to understand what's going on at all times. And lastly here, we're dealing with the kind of plague of unplanned work. There's things that come across our desk every day that we aren't prepared for, and we need a mechanism for dealing with that. What we typically see is that the requests for work, things that need to happen within an organization, get routed to some kind of central location. Oftentimes, this is just one person with a spreadsheet. And that person is in charge of routing this out to the functional teams that are going to help execute against that work. Now, what the labels for these teams are may be different within your context, but the process still remains. And when this process is a bottleneck, when it's not seamless, when it's difficult for people to work with, we're always going to try to find the path of least resistance. And we're going to go around it and start using our own maybe methodologies to execute against the work, our own systems to manage the intake and the output of what we're working on. And now suddenly you've got this, hodgepodge of different things that are going on, and you've got a system that doesn't work, requests that get missed, work that's not properly allocated, and you've got a bunch of frustrated folks on your team. And I can think that this is really best exemplified looking at this calendar. On a Monday morning, I walk in and this is my ideal work week. But before long, it starts to look a little bit more like this. And that's because we've got all these different things that we've got to do outside of our core functions. Prepare for status meetings, deliver that status, whether internally to stakeholders or externally to clients. Deal with the inevitable fires that come up, and suddenly our 40-hour work week is turned to 50, 60, or 70. It can often feel like we're falling behind. Now, with some of those challenges, what is it that Clarizen offers as a solution? Well, first, we want to provide you with a system that's adaptive. It doesn't help us if you need to call us every time that you need to make a change, right? You can't be truly agile in that way. We want to enable you to take ownership of the system and make the changes on your own. The second key here is collaboration. Things like email, messenger, text, those things are all great and they certainly have their place. But we really want to focus the conversation around the work that's going on and use it to really drive that work forward. And lastly, here we work with efficiencies. So things like workflow, automation, and governance. How can we leverage some of those to reduce the impact on ourselves and our time, as well as reduce the risk of human error within our processes? And so if I kind of wrap all those things back together with the challenges that we highlighted at the beginning, first, you're being asked to do more work faster and with fewer resources. We're going to help you manage that with in-context collaboration. For the challenge of visibility, you'll be provided with real-time reports and dashboards and the ability to share those with your proper stakeholders. And lastly, for dealing with that unplanned work that comes across our desk, well, we're going to be able to route that with powerful automated workflow, making sure it gets into the right hands in a timely and efficient manner. And folks, that's the high-level ideas of what we're going to be looking at here today. And so without further ado, I want to go ahead and pass it to two of my colleagues, Ethan and Daniel, who'll be walking us through the Clarizen demo here today.
Great. Thank you, Dimitri. So today, as we walk through the product demonstration, we're going to be taking you through the lens of a few different personas. Starting off here with Marcus Anderson, who is an executive in the system. And really, Marcus is looking to gain visibility into all of the work that is being carried across the organization. Here, we can see that we're looking at a portfolio dashboard of projects across different lines of business. So these categories here allow you to group your projects into various portfolios, or as I mentioned, lines of business, depending on your organization. It's flexible enough for you to be able to modify that. Now, in addition to being able to see the financial data here, as we're looking at things like budgeted costs versus actuals, we can actually roll and aggregate this up to the overall organization so that you can see the top level number here. As we continue to scroll down, you'll notice that there are additional reports, such as the project delivery and status report, allowing us to see when projects are slated to be delivered or completed across the next few quarters. Now, this not only allows us to see the timeline, but also interact with the report itself. Notice here as I hover over the off-track projects, we can focus in on just those that may need our attention. We even can hover over the bubbles themselves that represents the project and see additional details about those projects. Now, back to Dimitri's point about being agile and allowing organizations to be able to modify what they see here, you don't need Clarizen in order to modify this, right? So if you decide that you need additional points of data, or this may be too much data, you can do that on your own without leveraging Clarizen. Here, we can also see a cost by time and status. So another example of a different visualization that can be leveraged all inside Clarizen. Now, because of the fact that projects and all work is being managed inside of Clarizen, you're going to have up-to-date data. Everything that we see here is live data. As projects begin completion or get updated statuses, it's going to be reflected here on the dashboard. Not only that, from the dashboard itself, we can actually drill into a report by clicking on the hyperlink. And notice that at the top here, we've got many different pivots. So it's the same set of data, but allows you to slice and dice by different things. So maybe we're curious about how much effort each of these portfolios is really taken up from a project by project basis. Clarizen is going to give you the ability to not only portray one visualization here within a pivot, but there's 8 totals that you can actually leverage. As we scroll down, you'll see that the data supporting these visualizations actually can be seen. Now, with this particular data, we can actually look at various columns. So if you decide that there's additional things we need, like maybe the description of the project itself, we can actually search for that piece of data and bring it into the report, really allowing this to be self-service for executives as well as other project managers that may be looking at this report. Now, as we continue to scroll down here, notice a module that we refer to as the discussions module. This is something that's prevalent across the system and allows us to collaborate within context. So here, as Marcus is looking at certain projects and sees that this DevOps project is off track, we can actually look to see who's managing the project, as well as start a conversation. So I'll leverage the @ sign here to look up Paul and say, what's going on with the hashtag DevOps project? So a couple of things are happening here. One, the @ sign allows us to notify Paul. He can either get an email message if he's sitting on the train and respond from that email, and that response will actually be captured here within Clarizen. Secondly, we're calling out the project itself. This actually allows us to collaborate within context so that anyone that's part of this project, whether it be a team member, someone who's working on a task, or potentially someone that is replacing Paul, maybe he goes on leave and we need a second project manager to step in, they're going to all have the right visibility to see exactly all the conversations that have taken place on this project itself. So I'll go ahead and post that. Now again, Paul can either respond through email, or if he were logged into Clarizen itself, he would be able to respond right here, just as we're seeing now. So Paul is writing a response. That response will be captured here within this conversation, and everyone can have that same visibility into what's going on in the project. There it is, right there. And
now,
again,
Ethan, is there a way for us to share these reports and visualizations with folks externally or in a read-only format?
Yes, Daniel, actually there is. So up here, we've got the share functionality. And you've got an option to either share the link to this particular report. So those will go to folks that actually have an account within Clarizen. Now, for those that don't, we also have what we call a read-only widget. And that's going to allow us to generate a URL link that you can actually expire after a certain amount of time. You can actually require a password as well. But ultimately, with this URL, you'll be able to send out a sample of this report here. Actually, it's a live link. And so they're going to be able to see, your external users or counterparts, whether it's a vendor or a contractor or a customer that you're working with. Those that don't live inside of Clarizen will still have the same visibility as we see here, right? That's the same chart that we saw earlier on. They even have access to the key data below and can browse various different pivots that you've decided are relevant for this particular report. And you see the URL up here. We can actually paste this potentially in a SharePoint site or somewhere locally where we can always get up-to-date status.
These can be exported as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So here we also have the export functionality where you can send this out as an Excel or even download it, and same thing with the PDF.
In addition to some of the visualizations and the overall view of what's going on in the portfolio, is there a way for us to drill down and get a little bit more specifics on the projects and the way that they roll up in the hierarchy?
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. Here, I'll access the navigation menu. We've actually got a handy link here to my IT portfolio. So Marcus really has a focus on making sure that all the projects within the IT portfolio are running smoothly. So we want to leverage something like a roadmap, right? Where we can see all the projects that are within the IT portfolio, as well as that level deeper, as you mentioned, Daniel, seeing some of the key milestones here and exactly which ones are behind and where we may need to focus in our attention. So this is a great way to be able to visualize that. And on top of that, we can actually share this in the same manner that we just shared the report there through a widget read-only link.
That's a great way for those folks to stay on top and understand what's going on across their respective purview.
Yes, absolutely. Great. So we've taken a look at, from a reporting and dashboard perspective, some of the key elements that Clarizen is going to offer, that visibility into everything that's being carried out. Now we want to kind of go behind the scenes and see how a project gets requested in the system. How does that actually come in? And how can we leverage Clarizen to drive some of that workflow to make sure that everyone's aligned? So we're going to switch roles here, and we're going to go to a requester role. And I do want to point out that we are now logged in as Crystal Wright. Crystal is a business user here who is responsible for submitting new requests to the organization that will get evaluated and basically decide, which ones we want to work on. So notice that her experience is slightly different. Right, the landing page here has just a few buttons, starting with the social module here that allows Crystal to see all of the conversations that have taken place that involve her, whether or not that be on requests, conversations about files, conversations about projects, kind of a one-stop shop. Any requests that she's submitted thus far, she'll be able to see the status of those requests, as well as any scoring that's taken place, right, that the organization has taken through the evaluation process. It allows and really makes us efficient as far as, eliminating some of those back and forth emails. And then ultimately being able to access a new request menu so that we can submit new requests, whether it's for small work, an actual project, or potentially a change request. Now, this menu is just an example of the types of requests that can be handled by Clarizen. You as an organization can decide what's applicable for you as a business process. Let's go ahead and submit a new project request. See here, we've got a pop-up form, and let's go ahead and fill this out with, let's say we're doing a blockchain platform, and the request type is IT. By the way, the fields of data that you see here, especially pick lists and other values here, can be decided by you. So you decide, what's relevant for your business. You can create your own custom fields that can then be represented on this form. And then let's say this is actually going to allow our business to grow. And we can even give this an estimated cost, super high level at this point. as well as when we expect the project to be delivered, maybe next year sometime. We can also attach different documents. So there's out-of-the-box integrations to both Google Drive, Box, as well as SharePoint, so that we make sure that any files that are relevant stay within the request itself. So here I'm browsing a SharePoint site, and maybe there's a requirements document out there that I want to make sure is part of this request so that everyone can see. There we go. Notice also that 2 of these fields were automatically filled out by the system. So Clarizen obviously knows who's logged in, Crystal, as well as which department or division Crystal lives as part of. So we can automatically pull in the business sponsor. So I'll go ahead and create that request.
Are we able to tailor not only what's on the form, but also what happens once those requests are submitted?
You can. That's a great question, Daniel. So with the form itself, as you saw, we can decide the fields of data that are required, as well as what's behind those fields of data, right? We can typically maybe even drive workflow. So depending on the type of request it is or what department it lives as part of, we can automatically route notifications to the proper folks that live in those departments. And there it is. So we've now created the request itself. I've opened this up in a new tab. Let's actually go to that tab. All right, so we're looking at the request view. Up top here is where what we call the property card. It's got key fields of information. Remember, we put in an estimated cost, both non-labor as well as labor perspective. Clarizen automatically rolled that up for us to the total. We also see some of the key stakeholders listed on this potential project that's being requested. And down here, we've got the life cycle. So this is one of the things, Daniel, that can be driven off of this type of request. So because Crystal lives in this department, these requests should really go through this type of process, right? We'll start working the request. We'll actually have a small review process, a straightforward one here, where we get some approvers to look at this and decide whether or not we want to do it, all right? Now, she can always come back to this particular requested project and see exactly what's going on, right? So as the request itself moves forward in the life cycle, Crystal will be kept up to date without having to reach out every so often to see what's going on. All right.
That's a great way to eliminate some of those back and forth emails there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens now to this request? Great, it's been submitted. It's even got all the right files attached. Where does this get routed to, and where do we go from here, right? Let's go ahead and switch roles here now to Paul. You can see Paul is logged in. And he's going to be able to access a request queue, which allows Paul to see everything that's coming through the system, right? So this could be someone who's intake manager, for example, maybe it's the PMO that's looking at all requested projects. And we can essentially provide a list like this where you see everything that's been requested thus far, as well as any new ones. You can see blockchain platform is highlighted in bold here, and we've got all the right fields of data. We haven't yet gone through and started scoring this yet, but for this point, we're actually just going to assign this request. So let's assign this to ourselves to be able to work this. And we'll actually go in and take a look at that same similar view here, where we're taking a look at, kind of the highlights of what's been requested, as well as maybe take a look at the files itself that were attached to the request itself. There we go. There's our life cycle. We see that's moved forward in work, right? And that's because we assign this to ourselves. We're now looking at some of that key information, whether it's the requirements or any other additional files that have been attached. And let's say now we're kind of ready to start scoring this, right? Based on the components that came in those requirements, we know that it's strategically aligned with what we want to do as an organization, as well as we think it's going to have a pretty high impact. Notice that as we score this request, Clarizen will automatically add that up. So right now it's just simple arithmetic, adding up all the 4 different components, but you can have formula fields here as well, right? You can have some weighted scoring depending on what you choose for some of those key fields there, all right? And this is going to allow not only your requester, but everyone who has stake in this project, kind of to see where things are at from a scoring standpoint. All right. And once we're done with that, we're now ready to move this forward. So we want to submit this request for review. Got a nice easy button here at the top for submitting for approval. You can click on that, and automatically we're now moving forward in the life cycle. Notice that also we've got a new panel here on the right-hand side of approvers. This was automatically brought in by Clarizen based, again, on the fact that this request lives as part of a certain division. Also, because it's a capital request in IT, we know who the right approvers are, right? We want to automate a lot of this so that we don't have to think and we don't have to actually manually add those approvers. Now, by the way, these folks also get a notification within Clarizen as well as through email of a pending request review. They can then take a look at that information and make a decision. For the purpose of our demo today, we're actually going to go through and make that decision on behalf of these folks. Of course, in a real life implementation, we would not allow this, and we have validation rules around who can actually modify the approval state here. Notice though that as things get approved on a case-by-case basis from all the approvers, we're also time stamping exactly when that happens. So this essentially becomes your audit trail, and everyone can take a look back on here if there are ever questions about when this particular project was approved by whom, as well as, you know, any sort of documentation or conversations that take place. We'll be able to come back to this particular request itself. All right. So now that it's been approved, we can also see that automatically we've moved this project into the draft status. We're now ready to start the plan around this project itself, right? We'll go ahead and quickly switch views here. And by the way, we haven't discussed views yet up until this point, but essentially it allows us to look at projects, look at requests, and really focus in on the right data, right? Here we went in a request view because we were concerned with approving, evaluating, and understanding whether or not we want to move this project along. Once it's moved along and approved, let's switch views to an overview. And this is going to be more geared towards the project management core pieces, right? So things like understanding where we're at as far as the project completion standpoint, you know, when is this project due? And then again, our nice tidy roadmap here that allows us to visualize exactly what are the key milestones and when they're supposed to be completed. Just below that, we've also got a work plan. And this area here will allow us to manage some of those key core components as a project manager, right? Being able to see the various milestones as mentioned in the roadmap itself, as well as any tasks that are contained within those milestones. Really just key table stakes here if you're coming from a MS project world or other similar tools. Notice on the right-hand side also, we've got a Gantt chart that's going to visually allow us to see, again, what the dependencies are between each of those milestones. And then later on, as we're live with the project, anything like a critical path that's going to kind of focus us in on what's needed to be done. Okay.
Now, Ethan, I think a lot of our customers have come from the world of MSP. Are we able to bring in these work plans from MSP templates, and are we able to create projects as well without having to go through an entire request process or a life cycle as you've shown?
That's a great question, Daniel. There are a multitude of ways that we can actually create projects within Clarizen. We saw one where we started with a request process within the system itself, but we can also import from MSP into the system, and it will maintain and retain all of the key milestones, key dates, key tasks, and dependencies within each. And thirdly, there's also a way to initiate a project, say through an integration with Salesforce. So imagine when you've got an opportunity that's close to being signed and you want to give heads up to the implementation team that a project's coming down the pipe. In that particular case, we can automate exactly when that opportunity reaches a certain percentage and create that project inside of Clarizen. And along with the work plan itself, we can actually have, again, bring over things like the requirements document from the request, right? Let's make sure that there's a chain here of documents kind of passing through so that we're not dropping any balls or introducing any gaps in knowledge throughout that process. All right, so one other thing here as we're in this role as Paul as the project manager, we do want to cover, a project that's in flight, right? We're looking here at a project that hasn't started, but what about one that we're already managing? What are some aspects that Clarizen can assist with for project managers to be able to efficiently carry out those projects, as well as generate reporting and provide status updates to key stakeholders? I'm going to click on favorites here, and my machine learning project should be in flight. And we'll take a look at what's going on there. Yep, so looks like this project is well along its way. We can see a work plan with some completed milestones, as well as a Gantt here with key information. One of the ways, inevitably, as we manage projects, we're going to run into things like risks and issues, right? And we want to make sure that PMs are able to manage those as well as provide updates on that. So I'm going to switch views here one more time to the risks and issues view. Out of the box, Clarizen is going to allow you to associate risk as well as any issues that are associated with the project in Clarizen. So here we're looking at not only a way to, assign some of these issues out, I also provided with some impact details, right? Is this going to affect my financials on the project or schedule? When should we actually try to address this issue? And then also with risk, right? We can have a rating system that's automatically calculated based on things like impact and likelihood, and also map that visually on a heat map, right? So that we can see and kind of, again, focus in on just the ones that matter. Now, it's great that we're now managing not only the work plan, the project, the task, but risks and issues. But how do we share this status out in a nice, efficient manner? Well, for that, Clarizen actually has what we call the slide publisher. And this is going to allow us to generate a PowerPoint report that has all those key elements. We're basically going to leverage a template that we build once. We can, of course, have more than one template here. Notice that in this particular instance, we've got a number of different ones, depending on the type of information we want to provide. We could even have recent accomplishments. So let's say, great sprint, and maybe some concerns here, resourcing, maybe fight in the next few weeks. All right. You can attach this once it's been published to the project itself, as well as even add a post in discussion so that everyone who's following the project has visibility into what's going on, right? What's been generated so far. And we'll go ahead and click next here. So imagine the time that it typically takes to put together a PowerPoint, right? Bring in those red, yellow, green statuses into what we're trying to do. Here, within a matter of seconds, we've got our machine learning PowerPoint, and it's automatically downloaded for us. We'll actually open that up and make sure that it's showing on the screen here. There we go. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So the branding here, as well as the type of information you want to put, not only on the summary slide, title slide here, you can control, right? And then ultimately, you're going to be able to produce a report like this, where all of the key data is being extracted, right? Are we on track with the schedule? How are we doing with the budget, right? What are some of the recent accomplishments? We just put this in, if you recall, when I generated the project, and now it's on a living, breathing report, right? Not only that, we can see those risks as well as some of the color and visual highlighting that's going to help us kind of focus in on some of the key details here, okay? All right. So that about wraps it up for the project manager. We want to end this product demonstration by showing the last role here, which is that of a team member, right? So someone who is working the different tasks on these projects is going to collaborate with the PM as far as status updates. And we want to make sure that it's easy enough for folks to use the system, right? So here, I'm logged in as Matt. Matt's the developer. He's working on a few different projects. When he logs into Clarizen, he's going to land on a page like this, where he can access his tasks, look at timesheets, and again, being able to have those discussions that are relevant to the work that he's performing. Now, if we take a look at the task here, many folks, as we saw in the slide deck intro, like to operate from a calendar perspective. Here, Matt can see within the month of March all the different tasks as well as when they're due. So here we can see the highlighting here based on the project. So we can actually focus in maybe on the SSO project. We had a few tasks that were due, and we can click into the tasks themselves and see exactly what those are about, right? If we access the hamburger button here, we can actually see all of the related discussions that have taken place. If we wanted to add a file, we could here as well. Without ever leaving this particular screen, we can do a lot with, right? So here, let's go ahead and log time to something that's due tomorrow, for example, because we're at risk and looks like it hasn't been worked on. We can report time here, put in 2 hours. You can also decide if you want folks to be able to submit additional commentary on a particular task that might help the PM understand what that time is being worked on. All right. And now back on the home screen, we can also provide team members with a more traditional timesheet, right? A view where week by week, we're going to be able to look at all the tasks where we should be logging time on and quickly go through and log those hours, right?
Now, Ethan, we may have some viewers who are also interested in some of the more advanced functionality in Clarizen, like resource management and financial planning. Why don't we go ahead and take a quick look at those two areas now before the end of our session?
Absolutely, Daniel. Let's go ahead and switch roles here to a resource manager. So Sandra here is the resource manager for the business analyst group, as we can see. Now, in this particular view, the workbench, she's able to see all the folks that are part of her team, as well as what their capacity is over the next 8 months here. Now, one of the things that's going to be helpful in this workbench view is the ability to see and leverage a heat map that quickly allows Sandra to glean insight into who has availability, as well as who may be over allocated.
We're able to get to more granular frames of reference as well, correct?
We are. So in this particular view here, we're looking at it by month, but we also have the option to your point, get more granular and look at things by week and potentially by day as well. The other thing to mention is that we can also leverage, in addition to a group here, such as business analysts, we can look at job titles as well as roles, so that as a resource manager, you can look across different skills and different job titles, and that can be super useful. So that's resource management. Let's go ahead and hop back now to reports and dashboards, so we can take a look at a sample of a financial dashboard. So here is a collection of a number of different reports, starting with the KPIs at the very top here. You see that these numbers are essentially rolled up from all of the projects that are being executed inside of Clarizen. We not only have things like actual costs, but we can bounce it up against budgeted costs and even automatically calculate a balance. The ability to also slice and dice by capital versus operational is quite useful when you're looking at things month over month, as well as being able to categorize that spend, right? Whether it's hardware or software, if you're in an IT PMO, or any other non-labor resource categories that you may set up as an organization. Now, as we continue to scroll down here, you'll see, in addition to those reports, you'll also be able to forecast the revenue that you're expecting month over month, as well as quarter over quarter. Right? It's totally up to you how you want to visualize that and report on that. And then a couple more reports here where we're able to see over different projects how that spend is split up. And here on the bottom right, a percentage spend by category. So whether you're in a business where most of it's labor versus some hardware costs that you're incurring, as well as anything additional like travel. So that sums it up for our introductory webinar today. Again, thank you for joining us, and Daniel, thank you for the questions that have been raised throughout the webinar here. Appreciate your time, everyone.